So, just recently, I got to see an early screening of The Accountant 2, a sequel to the 2016 action blockbuster film starring Ben Affleck about an autistic accountant, who also just so happens to be a deadly combatant and hitman. Autism representation in film is honestly something that tends to be very hit or miss, especially in more mainstream films like this one.
I wish Freddy Krueger would come and chop off your head.
In the past few years in particular, there have been many misses when it comes to representing autism in film. On the surface, The Accountant 1 and 2 might seem like your average Die Hard or John Wick wannabe type film, which I can very easily understand why. However, upon watching both, I can very soundly say that not only are these perhaps two of the most unique, genuinely groundbreaking action films to ever hit Hollywood, but also probably two of the best representations of autism in Hollywood ever. That may not seem like it's saying much, of course, given how Hollywood usually butchers autism, but in something like The Accountant, there's a surprising sense of nuance to how it tackles autism within its main character, and how it handles such a subject with true respect, and there's actually loads of research done, plus actually talking to real autistic people to get their experiences. Of all the movies out there, I did not think that two films starring Ben Affleck of all people would be some of the best autism representation to ever grace the big screen. But I gotta hand it to Warner Brothers, they actually did put in the effort to make a genuinely good portrayal of autism. Shame they can't act with the same care when it comes to preserving animation. So today, I want to discuss The Accountant 1 and 2 and why they are some of the best autism portrayals in film and what the rest of Hollywood can really learn from how these films work. If you're into film-based discussions overall that dive into different Hollywood archetypes, consider subscribing since I pretty much only make videos discussing film, television, and video games anyway. You can also join my Discord to suggest a movie, show, or game you think I should review here on YouTube. To start, let's look at The Accountant 1 and discuss how this film became a thing to begin with. In 2008, a screenwriter named Bill Dubuque was approached by Mark Williams, a film and television producer who at the time was best known for producing a crime TV show called Undercover Heart. Dubuque had been looking for a killer screenplay at the time, and Williams pitched him the idea of a financial thriller starring a fast-talking forensic accountant. Dubuque wasn't really feeling this idea, but this gave him an idea of his own. What if the accountant in this situation was actually autistic? He ended up writing a script about an autistic accountant who just so happens to be an incredibly skilled gunman and hand-to-hand fighter, and embarks on a dangerous mission after thinking he's found some foul play going on with a client of his. The script sat dormant for a long time until, surprisingly, Warner Brothers of all people picked up the script in 2015. Gee, can you imagine that? Warner Brothers actually taking a risk by picking up a completely original, distinct concept? Sure wouldn't see that today. Ben Affleck was brought on to play the main autistic character since he was currently playing Batman for Warner Brothers in movies like Batman v Superman and also Justice League.
What's your mother's name? Martha. My mommy's name is Martha too. Wait, what's your father's name?
Jonathan?
Mine's Thomas.
While to my knowledge, Ben Affleck is not an autistic actor, I actually find his portrayal to be surprisingly really good and very respectfully done. Oftentimes, when a neurotypical actor is chosen to play an autistic character, it can be very easily misinformed and come off as rather disrespectful or even straight up harmful as a portrayal of autism. Here though, despite Ben Affleck being neurotypical, he actually pulls off a surprisingly accurate portrayal of an autistic person on this area of the spectrum. I myself, being an autistic person, actually saw a lot of my own personal traits and inner anxieties in a character like Christian Wolf, which is the accountant character that Ben plays here. While making this film, Ben took it upon himself to find autistic males that were in their 30s or 40s, around the age that Christian Wolf is in this film, and just make conversation with them, asking how they feel about certain situations, what some of their interests are, and things that would help him, being a neurotypical person, be able to gain more of an insight on what autism really is and how it should be accurately portrayed in film. This might sound very small, but ultimately this is what makes all the difference here. The majority of the time with autism representation in film, filmmakers or actors working on a movie might not even bother doing research or actually talking to autistic people, and might go ahead with their own idea of what it is, which is often subjugated to plenty of harmful stereotypes about autism that have existed for decades now, or just misinformed ideas about autism mannerisms, stimming, or what hyperfixations look like. The fact Ben actually went out of his way to speak to autistic people and hear everything they had to say and hear their stories so he could be educated honestly is a really great thing. More films overall really need to take this approach. To give an example, like I've talked about in previous videos about the film Music, a big reason why that film fails on so many levels for autism representation is because the actress Maddie Ziegler, chosen to play the autistic character of Music, isn't actually autistic herself. In order to get an idea of what autism might look like, she watched Leonardo DiCaprio's character in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and also watched videos of parents recording their autistic children having meltdowns, and left it at that. Things like this are often what lead to harmful portrayals of autism in media, but when real research is done and you actually talk to real autistic people, you have a much better chance of creating a portrayal that will actually resonate with many people overall. This film is also great for not infantilizing the character of Christian Wolf either. At the start of the film, we see a flashback of Christian as a child at a neuroscience center where his parents are discussing with a specialist about what being autistic means for their son. It's here Christian meets a young, nonverbal autistic girl who he becomes friends with, since it's the first person he's met who truly understands where he's coming from on many things. It's also here that Christian's mom decides she doesn't want to be a part of their family anymore and leaves, leaving his dad to care for him and his brother, Braxton. Strangely enough, as awful as this situation is, it seems to be the thing that really pushes him to come into his own and stop letting people push him around or tell him what he is and what he isn't. He begins training in several different forms of combat and refines both his body and his mind to become a lean, mean, counting and killing machine. As over the top as some of it is, being an action thriller blockbuster, I really like the fact that Christian is not shown to depend on anyone here at all. Rather than being infantilized by the neurotypical people around him or his incredible math skills being shown as something that helps lift up the neurotypical people around him, it's shown as something that he himself had worked on to hone and harness as his strength. And ultimately, it's what makes him who he is. He is the main character of this story, and weirdly enough, that's the first time I reviewed a movie on this channel where I can truly say that the autistic character here is actually the main character. I've reviewed plenty of movies at this point where autistic characters are either sidelined or just straight up villainized, but this is the first time where I've seen a real positive, heroic, and actually pretty respectful portrayal of an autistic character that's put at the forefront of a movie. I also really like how this film shows the strength of people from all over the autism spectrum and doesn't objectify them either, but shows them as real people. As stated before, Christian meets a non-verbal girl at the neuroscience center whose name is Justine. Throughout the entirety of this film, there is a British female voice talking to him through his phone, and this voice will often provide him forensic details or updates for the cases he's involved in. She more or less functions as both the Q and the M to his James Bond. However, towards the end of this film, it's revealed that this voice was none other than Justine, now an adult and using an AAC device, having now become the leader of the neuroscience center since she's actually the daughter of its founder. And Christian now donates a large portion of the funds he gets on his escapades to the center to keep it all going. I honestly really like this twist, and the fact it also puts a person on another area of the spectrum in a really positive light, and again, doesn't objectify them at all, but still shows them as a real person. To me, this is where The Accountant especially shines when it comes to autism representation. Overall, the first Accountant movie is a very fun ride with some surprisingly well done portrayals of autism. There are a few things that I think do hold this film back from being truly great though, mostly to do with the flow of the story of the film itself. In The Accountant, there of course is the main twist about Justine being Christian's handler all along, but in addition to this, there are technically also 2 or 3 other twists alongside this. Generally, a film only has one or two main plot twists, since when you have one plot twist, it can usually very easily be placed at the end of a film, after giving the audience enough time to grow attached to the characters in the movie or accustomed to the environment or rules that the film is showcasing, only to shatter expectations once that final twist is reached. If there are two twists, this can also work at the end of a film, since you can have one twist be paid off, and that can lead directly into another, possibly even bigger twist. I think a film that actually does this very well in particular is M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, which, of course, I won't spoil here in case you haven't seen it. However, in the case of The Accountant, there are actually 5 different twists that all directly tie into each other, and these are all paid off at the very end of the film. This ultimately creates a more confusing atmosphere by the film's end and throws off the entire flow of the film's narrative too, since it now has to go back to 5 separate moments from earlier and attempt to explain or shed more light on each one of them. Unfortunately, this is just balancing way too much when we're already 2 hours into the film, and it creates a very disjointed feel to the film's conclusion. But honestly, even despite that, The Accountant is still a great blockbuster thrill ride, and surprisingly some of the most insightful, nuanced portrayals of an autistic character we've ever gotten out of Hollywood. I honestly really hope more movies do take cues to how Ben Affleck handled this, especially with consulting actually autistic people, because clearly he gets it. So that's The Accountant 1. Now you might be wondering, how does The Accountant 2 compare? Absolutely better in every way, that's how. I was fortunate enough to catch an early screening of The Accountant 2 last week on Tax Day, which was very fitting for this movie. I'd already heard earlier reviews had been praising this film, but just like any movie I go to, I went in with zero expectations whatsoever and tried to keep an open mind. And man, did The Accountant 2 not disappoint. This film takes not only what was great about the original Accountant film and makes it even better, but also takes some of its notable flaws and improves them, while also diving even deeper to Christian Wolff as an autistic character, and becomes even more willing to show the struggles he has on a daily basis being someone on the spectrum, and constantly being surrounded by neurotypical people's expectations of him. This film opens with a scene that I felt was absolutely perfect at doing that right off the bat, where Christian is actually attending a speed dating session. So much of what was shown here I personally very much relate to, as someone who hasn't always been the best at socializing with others that may not share my hyperfixations on film, television, or things of that nature. In this case, Christian is so hyperfixated on discussing accounting and also just so blunt about everything that even though literally every woman in the room lines up to try and speak to him after seeing him, nothing he says clicks with them because he is just so open and honest about everything.
I thought I saw an Airstream in one of your photos?
Yes, that's my home. That's where I live.
Oh, permanently?
Well, as long as I'm alive. Eventually, this body will be a corpse.
This was a surprisingly pretty relatable thing for me personally, since oftentimes I just speak my mind and I don't really mince words at all, so seeing this area of the spectrum portrayed in an actually pretty accurate light was really nice. Christian also has to essentially mask and force himself to smile in this scene, which I also very much relate to, and I imagine there are other autistic people out there who feel the same way. Sometimes we might be asked to smile or look happy when with others, even when we might not realize that our facial expressions don't convey happiness to a neurotypical person. I might actually be feeling happy in that moment, but not showing it directly on my face at all, so seeing Christian do this is something that very much hit home for me. And it's not treated like a joke either, since the audience is not intended to laugh at Christian for being blunt and these women not understanding him, but instead is supposed to sympathize with him, which is really great. Not enough movies really have the nuance to be able to do something like that, and instead it may just either create a joke out of an autistic character's mannerisms or just make them look helpless and infantilized. The Accountant 1 and 2 don't do either of those things and have created a thoughtful, competent autistic character to be the main star in their films. The Accountant 2 also improves upon its predecessor by being just even more fun and having a better flow to its story. This film has Christian Wolff team up with his brother from the first movie, a hitman who is played by Jon Bernthal, best known for playing the Punisher. Their dynamic is fantastic in this movie, and Affleck and Bernthal have very good chemistry on screen together. They really create an incredibly convincing portrayal of two estranged brothers who are brought together to unravel this mystery that has been brought to them about a family in Mexico and their mysterious disappearance after the emergence of a new drug cartel. I'm not going to go into as much detail about the specific plot for this one, obviously, because most people probably haven't even seen it yet, given I attended an early screening as I stated before, but I do want to touch on a few things that I really liked about it. Much like the first movie, The Accountant 2 doesn't treat Christian as some all-knowing savant who can magically come up with a solution to every single problem that he encounters in this film, but as a real human with very realistic struggles, especially when it comes to being on the spectrum. There's a scene that really speaks to this in particular where Christian and his brother Braxton are sitting on top of Christian's trailer talking to each other after 8 long years of not having seen each other, and Braxton asks Christian why he never communicated with him after all this time. Christian explains that he didn't feel like he had to since he thought Braxton still knew that he cared about him. I really like this because it shows Christian, despite being autistic and recognizing the hardships that come with that, especially when it comes to socializing with others, still recognizes it's what makes him, him, and it's actually really powerful and just really nice to see a positive representation of.
I spent years looking for you. Do you not miss me because of me, or is it your condition?
I'm just me.
The Accountant 2 also succeeds at creating a much more cohesive narrative than the first film, since rather than having 3 separate timelines shown on screen with 5 different twists to unravel by the film's end, there instead is one main mystery to unravel here and one main twist that comes up towards the end of the film. This works much better in my opinion, making for a much smoother ride all the way through, and this is exceptionally boosted by the way Christian and Braxton Wolf play off of each other. It's just a fun, high-octane ride all the way through. Overall, The Accountant 1 and 2 really speak to what I think Hollywood should be looking for much more when trying to represent autism. Rather than using an autistic character as a prop to boost up a neurotypical person's story or making them an over-the-top caricature of autism, I think this is much more in line with how it should be portrayed. These aren't perfect movies by any means, but they are much more thoughtful with how they portray autism than the majority of films out there. I would much rather watch The Accountant again over The Fanatic or Ezra or The Unbreakable Boy or Music. But what do you think? Am I wrong? Is The Accountant actually a bad movie? Is The Fanatic a better movie? Let me know down in the comments below. Special thanks to my patrons DDC1996 and Trayvon Gibson for supporting over there, and also Balf Games for becoming a YouTube member as well. Once again, be sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have a movie, game, or show you think I should cover here on YouTube, be sure to join my Discord where you can suggest media for me to cover here on YouTube. You can also check out my letterbox where I review movies and shows, oftentimes movies and shows I won't always cover here on YouTube. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope I can keep getting this message out there. I've been Otterly Noah, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye!